Way back in episode 12, I reviewed the relaunch of DC's Emerald Archer, the Green Arrow, and that relaunch was of course written by noted filmmaker Kevin Smith. Now, if you know anything about Smith's movies, you know there is a strong geek pop culture thread throughout most of them, including a lot of comic references. Smith had worked in some comics before, mainly doing graphic adventures of the various characters from some of his movies. Smith then moved into the mainstream when he helmed the Marvel Knights relaunch of Daredevil in 1999. After that came the Green Arrow relaunch. Now, while those two mainstream books were successful, they did come with a bit of a drawback. Both books suffered massive shipping delays.
Look, I'm not so foolhardy as to not understand that working on film/TV projects pays way more than the comic industry ever could. But the fact of the matter is, Smith's 6-issue Daredevil story took a year and a half to come out, and while the first half of Quiver, the Green Arrow relaunch, did come out, that was mainly due to the fact that DC made sure that 6 issues were actually completed before soliciting the book for sale. Unfortunately for Smith, the lateness trend would continue. His next project, a Spider-Man Black Cat miniseries, had a 3-year break between issues 3 and 4, and a Daredevil Bullseye series he did only had 1 issue come out in 2002, and almost 15 years later, fans are still waiting.
Now then, I will point out that, yes, Smith was working on those 2 miniseries while he was doing post-production for his movie Jersey Girl and pre-production for his next movie, Clerks 2, and obviously that could take up a lot of time. And yes, he has had a couple of other comic book projects come out since then, namely 2 Batman miniseries and a Green Hornet series. However, on those Batman books, he had a co-writer, and really his Green Hornet series is only loosely based on a rejected movie pitch. He didn't really script much of it. Anyway, back to the Green Arrow. Now, Quiver was not Smith's only work on that book. He actually wrote the next 5 issues after that, which would explore the follow for that storyline. Those issues would be collected in the volume titled Sounds of Violence, which is what we're covering today. So with that in mind, let's start Green Arrow, Sounds of Violence.
Green Arrow chases down after Richard, Mia's former boyfriend/pimp. However, Oliver Queen is brought back up. Speedy, Mia has taken up the mantle of Green Arrow's longtime sidekick. This is all really just a dream, as Oliver rousts Mia out of bed, pointing out that she's running late for her return to school. Ollie does take notice of Mia mentioning the name Speedy as she wakes up, and he then discovers a crossbow under Mia's bed while she showers. Oliver takes his concerns about Mia to his son Connor. Ollie points out that Mia is just a kid, and Connor points out that Oliver has worked with kids before, and why would now be any different? The fact is, Ollie has always wanted to be a wannabe dad. He also points out that Oliver is really just continuing to avoid Dinah Lance, the Black Canary.
Okay, I know Connor Hawke did appear in Quiver, but I didn't really go too far into his backstory other than he's Oliver Queen's son. Well, he is the son of Oliver Queen and Sandra Moonday Hawke, who was a hippie commune member with whom Ollie had a fling with in college. And he never really got to know Ollie. Connor grew up in an ashram with a group of monks, and would only meet Ollie when he was a full adult, and not too long after that, Ollie was killed in a plane crash. Now, Connor would go on to briefly assume the identity of Green Arrow before returning to his ashram. I should also point out that Connor is rather unique in the sense that he is of a mixed heritage. His mother is part African and part Korean, and his father is obviously white. This has also led to a bit of a confusion with the character, as many people believe he is the son of Shadow, a Chinese mercenary with whom Ollie also had a child with. But no, this is a mistake a lot of comic creators have made. Connor's mother is Sandra Moonday Hawke, the hippie, not the Chinese assassin.
Oliver spends the next few hours mulling over whether or not to call Dinah at the JSA headquarters. Just as he finally picks up the phone, Mia arrives back at the youth center. Ollie tells Mia that they'll talk about her desires to be speedy the next morning and goes out on patrol. Oliver and Connor take down a group of muggers and return home to find Mia practicing with her crossbow. Ollie takes Mia aside and tells her that he doesn't want her in the superhero life. He's come to realize that a hero taking on a kid's sidekick is just a huge mistake. He points out the drug problems that his former partner Roy had, and the deaths of Jason Todd and Donna Troy, the former Wonder Girl.
Not to mention, one would need to take into account Mia's past as a prostitute. I mean, who knows how on earth that could possibly come back to bite her.
Mia concedes to Ollie's decision, and the two go inside where Oliver finally calls Dinah and sets up a date to sort things out. A few days later, Dinah Lance prepares to meet up with Ollie when Stargirl enters the room to tell her of Green Arrow's arrival. Dinah starts to finish getting ready when Stargirl points out that Oliver is talking with Hawkman. This causes Dinah to panic and rush out of the room to find Carter and Ollie laughing uproariously.
Throughout the 1970s and 80s, Green Arrow and Hawkman were both members of the Justice League, and they would actually spend a lot of their spare time in the book clashing over their disparaging political views. Ollie obviously being a liberal, and Cotter Hall being a diehard conservative. So yeah, Dinah has an obvious reason to be worried here.
Oliver turns to Dinah and explains that he and Carter are merely two men bonding over their shared experience of returning from the dead. When Dinah takes Ollie to task over coming in costume, Carter offers to let Oliver borrow a suit. This is a bit of a ruse, though, as after Dinah leaves, Oliver thanks Carter for helping him conceal his nerves. Carter assures Oliver that everything should go fine, but reminds Ollie that neither Arrow or Canary may be ready for a serious relationship so quickly. Ollie and Dinah goes out where she fills him in on other men she's dated, namely Ra's al Ghul and Dr. Midnight, and the situation proves to be rather awkward until the Riddler makes an appearance in an attempt to rob the patrons of the restaurant. Oliver and Dinah work together to take him down and afterwards begin kissing passionately. Meanwhile, in Philadelphia, a young hero named Virago goes out on patrol when she's suddenly dropped with a tranquilizer dart. As she struggles to get up, a masked man approaches her, and he pulls out a tape recorder which then plays a recording of her screaming. He then takes out a gun and shoots her. Back at JSA headquarters, Ollie tries to quietly slip away, regretting that he didn't heed Carter's advice. Unfortunately, he winds up bumping right into Hawkman, and the two begin fighting. The commotion is enough to wake Dinah up, and she lets loose a canary cry to break up Oliver and Carter. This brings out Stargirl and Mr. Terrific. Dinah borrows some of Terrific's T-spheres to block the free view everyone's getting, and tells Ollie to leave. Meanwhile, in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Buckeye, a superhero who recently moved from Ohio, returns home to find his wife strung up and bleeding to death in the bathroom. Virago's killer is waiting there for Buckeye. The killer takes down Buckeye in a similar manner to Virago, and as he leaves, he overhears a TV report about Green Arrow and Black Canary taking down the Riddler. He then decides his next stop should be Star City.
Okay, the killer here is named Onomatopoeia, and his name is derived from the fact that his primary form of communication is the repetition of these sounds in the area surrounding him. Now, he's an expert in both weaponry and martial arts, though it's unknown whether or not he is a superpowered individual, or as the DC Universe calls them, metahumans.
Back in Star City, Mia and Connor sit in the kitchen of the youth center while Connor prepares breakfast. Mia begins flirting with Connor just as Ollie returns. Mia drops a not-so-subtle hint that she knows what happened with him and Dinah as she leaves for school. Afterwards, both men discuss recent events, with Oliver wondering what exactly Connor's romantic life is.
Okay, a bit of an explanation for this scene here. There was a long-running fan theory that Connor Hawk was probably gay. Not that there's anything wrong with him being gay if he were, but this is mainly due to the fact that during his run as Green Arrow, Connor never really had a love interest or really had much of an interaction with any women at all or expressed any romantic feelings towards women. Of course, a lot of the people who came up with this theory always seem to fail to take into account that, well, Connor was raised by monks who tend not to be women.
Later, Oliver and Connor go out on patrol and happen across another mugging at a parking ramp. Connor goes off after one of the muggers and runs into a stairwell where Onomatopoeia is waiting. The villain kills the thug and trips Connor up, then pulls out a gun. Before Connor can get to his bow, Onomatopoeia fires. Oliver finds Connor with a bullet wound to his head and rushes him to the hospital. Mia and Dinah arrived as the doctors work to stabilize Connor. Connor is stabilized, but he'll need risky surgery to remove the bullet. Back with Onomatopoeia, he sees a news report about Connor's surgery and decides to head to the hospital and finish things off. Back at the hospital, Oliver volunteers to give Connor a blood transfusion. The procedure begins as Onomatopoeia arrives and begins making his way through the hospital. The killer makes his way to the OR where Connor's surgery is about to begin. As Onomatopoeia begins killing Connor's doctors, Canary crashes through the viewing window of the OR. Onomatopoeia manages to wound Dinah before she can let loose a canary cry. It's then that Oliver, still woozy from the transfusion, makes his way inside. He shoots Onomatopoeia and then holds the killer at arrow point while the remaining doctors finish Connor's operation. Just as the procedure finishes, Onomatopoeia begins fighting back. He and Oliver begin fighting all the way to the hospital roof. Eventually, Oliver pins Onomatopoeia's foot to a ledge, and rather than talk, the killer instead chooses to throw himself over the ledge. No body is found. Connor manages to recover and is greeted by Oliver, Dinah, and a still flirtatious Mia. Connor does confirm his heterosexuality as Oliver tries to shoot Mia down. Oliver then takes in a moment, feeling that he's finally alone with family.
And so concludes Green Arrow, Sounds of Violence. How was it? Well, on the plus side, after the major events of Quiver, which had Oliver Queen coming back to life and the demonic forces and all the superhero cameos, it was nice to get a few kind of quiet short stories out of the way. It made for a really good palate cleanser follow-up to Quiver. Also, throughout most part, there is some really good artwork in this, and there's some pretty decent characterization, though there's a major problem I do have I'll get to. And, well, in fact, I'll get to those negatives right now. I have made the complaint before about Phil Hester's artwork. I like Phil Hester's artwork for the most part, but when it comes to his women, they have a tendency to all look alike, particularly in a story that had 3 blonde characters in it. Stargirl, Black Canary, and Mia Dearden. And they all kind of look alike. This is despite the fact that both Mia and Stargirl are supposed to be teenagers, and Dinah is a woman in her late 20s, early 30s, thereabouts. And, I mean, take this shot I'm going to be showing you right here, this scene where Dinah and Mia are in the same room together. I couldn't tell which one of them was which. The only way I could figure it out was by looking to see if Dinah was in her Black Canary costume, which means the only way I could identify it was to look at Dinah's butt. Yeah. Also, a minor quibble with the, well, not so minor quibble with the characterization in this, but the whole thing with Mia suddenly out of nowhere flirting with Connor, and guess what? That goes nowhere. It came out of nowhere. It really didn't add anything except to maybe fuel the whole Connor Hawk is gay theory. And again, that just felt really forced and out of place. It doesn't really belong in this. And, well, that's about it. I'm not going to say the story, like I said, for the most part I did enjoy this story, but those qualms I had did really drag it down a little bit. I'm going to give Green Arrow, Sounds of Violence, and again, because of the voting, we've already selected what we'll be doing next time on the Random Trade Review. So, see you in 2 weeks for Uncanny Avengers Volume 1, The Red Shadow.